we're not seeing things real time in the world. What we're able to see is that we live in the past. When you think the moment now occurs, it's already happened a long time ago. It's already passed by the time you think that you see it. For all you know, my talk might be over by now. Okay, it's not that far, but what it means is that signals in the brain take a large amount of time to actually get processed. And this is because of the speed at which signals come into the brain, and it's actually an extremely slow speed. Signals come into the brain, and they have to get processed and mushed around and so on, and then finally you have this conscious experience, but it's always behind reality. And so what this means is that your perception of the world is like one of these live television shows, like Saturday Night Live, which is not actually live. They air this with a delay in case somebody cusses or falls down or there's a wardrobe mishap, that kind of thing. And so what you're seeing is not actually live, and this is the same with our perceptual lives. So how far in the past do we live? Well, I did a whole series of studies, which I'm not going to show you here, but it turns out it's about 80 to 100 milliseconds is how far in the past we live. But this is just for the flash lag effect. This is just in vision. Now, there's something very significant about this, which is within the visual system, not all signals get processed at the same speed. Instead, you process bright signals at a particular speed and dim signals at a slower speed, and the difference between the brightest and the dimmest signals you can see is 80 milliseconds. And so what's happening is the brain is collecting up all of the information before it makes a conclusion about what it's seeing at some moment. It's collecting up everything from the bright to the dim information. So what I've suggested in the literature is that Mother Nature has carved out this window of time as the balance of two constraints, which is, on the one hand, she wants to operate as close to the border of the present as possible. But on the other hand, she has to account for the way that things get smeared out in time based on just the mechanics of the retina and what happens from there. So what this means is that the visual system waits to collect up all the evidence, bright to dim, before it concludes anything about what's happened in there. Now, here's the really interesting part. What I just showed you is from the visual system, and that's this 80 millisecond. But how far in the past do we live in total? I mean, what's the total amount between here and here? I mean, we know that this gets incorporated into what you think you see, but how far is that distance? Well, what we have, and I'll show you this in a minute, but what we have is this unified percept of the world across all of our senses. But it turns out that our senses all process things at very different speeds. And somehow our brain unifies all that, and when you think that the moment now is occurring with all of your senses, your brain has to wait to collect up all of that. So what's the slowest thing? The slowest thing is the signals from your toes, because that has to climb all the way up your spinal cord to your brain. So if I touch your toe and your nose at the same time, you'll feel that as simultaneous, but that's very weird, right? Because the signals from your nose get to your brain right away, and the signals from your toes have to travel up here. So the question is, when your brain registers the signal from your nose, does it say, okay, before I perceive that, I'm going to wait and see if anything else comes up the pipeline? And the answer is somehow yes. That's exactly what it's doing. It waits to collect up all this information. And so because the brain waits to collect this up, this led me to a bizarre but testable prediction that tall people live further in the past than short people because their brain has to wait to collect up all that information. I announced this and our results from this on NPR one day, and when I got back to my lab, I logged into my email, and I had dozens of emails from people who said, I'm short, and I really appreciate you saying that. So it turns out that in total, on average, we probably live something like half a second in the past. That's how long it takes for the brain to collect up all this information from our toes and everything else and put this all together. And I was thinking about this recently, and the fact that your brain has to put all this together before you have any conscious experience of it leads to an interesting consequence, which is that if you are walking down the street enjoying a coffee and something happens that causes your brain to suddenly cease, like that, what it means is that before all the conscious signals come together, you're dead. Your brain's already squished. And so you won't perceive your own death, which is really interesting, right? And it's not just true of something like, it's not just true of something like this. It's anything that's faster than the signals can come together. So if you get shot in the head or get blown up with a bomb or something, you will disappear before you were aware of what happened, because it takes half a second for your brain in normal circumstances to put this all together. And so that's the good news from science.